Let's start with a truth most people don't want to hear. No one comes into your life by accident. Not your closest friend. Not the romantic partner who once said you were their whole world. Not even that stranger who suddenly shows an unusual amount of interest in you. Behind every smile, every outstretched hand, there's something hidden. A silent question. What can I get from you? It's not always malicious. In fact, most of the time, it's not even conscious. People are drawn to you because of what you represent, your status, your connections, your comfort, your knowledge, your influence. Or sometimes simply because watching you struggle makes them feel better about themselves. Harsh? Yes, but necessary. 500 years ago, Machiavelli shattered the comforting illusion we all like to believe that people love purely, give selflessly, and stay loyally. He wrote, "Men are ungrateful, fickle, liars, and deceivers. They shun danger and are greedy for gain." And the scary part, he wasn't being cynical, he was being observant. Now ask yourself this. Have you ever had someone disappear from your life the moment you were no longer useful to them? A friend who stopped calling when you hit rock bottom. A partner who once adored your presence, but slowly pulled away the moment you started asking for more than you gave. A colleague who praised your work in meetings, then took credit for it behind closed doors. We all have. And if you haven't yet, you will. Because that's how the world works. Not in theory, but in reality. See, we've been raised on idealistic slogans. Give without expecting. Be kind always. And while these sound noble, they often leave you wide open vulnerable to those who know how to take without giving back. Here's the wake-up call. You are valuable. And valuable things should never be free. It doesn't mean you have to become cold or transactional. It means you start paying attention. You start pricing your time, your energy, your loyalty, your presence like the scarce, precious resources they are. Because when you don't, others will. And they'll price it cheap. That's the reality Machiavelli wanted us to see. Not to make us bitter, but to make us aware. So that we stop living like open books waiting to be read and start living like vaults, carefully choosing who gets access and at what cost. In this video, we're going to dive deeper into that truth. We'll explore how to navigate a world where affection is often a disguise and loyalty can be just another form of leverage. Because when you finally understand how people move around you not by love, but by incentive, you stop being the one getting played and start becoming the one who sets the rules. Let's begin. Have you ever wondered why certain people suddenly show up in your life? Why they become unusually kind, overly supportive, or strangely attentive only to vanish just as quickly? Here's the truth most won't admit out loud. No one enters your life without a reason, and no gesture is ever entirely free. It sounds cynical, doesn't it? But take a moment, really look back. That coworker who mentored you, was it because they believed in your potential? Or because they saw a shortcut through your effort? That partner who promised forever, were they truly in love with you or with what you represented? Safety, escape, attention, a way to fill their own emptiness? The answer is often uncomfortable. We like to think people are drawn to our souls, our kindness, our light. But in reality, what pulls others toward us is rarely who we are, it's what we offer. Status, security, knowledge, comfort, even, disturbingly, the twisted satisfaction of watching us fail. Machiavelli saw through this illusion over 500 years ago. He wrote, "Men are ungrateful, fickle, false, and cowardly, always eager for personal gain." He didn't say this to be cruel. He said it to wake us up, and that wake-up call is long overdue. Because in today's world, we're still operating under the same old myths. We tell ourselves, if I give more, people will love me more. If I'm always there, I'll be respected. But often the opposite is true. The more available you are, the less you're valued. The more you give without boundaries, the more you're taken for granted. You see, we are all part of a silent marketplace where affection, loyalty, and even pity are traded like commodities. Every compliment is a coin. Every favor is an IOU. Every smile, a negotiation. And that's not necessarily evil, it's just how human nature works. Your real problem isn't that people want something from you. That's inevitable. Your real problem is forgetting to charge for what they take. Think of your time, your energy, your presence. You've been treating them like freebies, but they're not, they're assets. And the world will keep withdrawing from you until you start setting a price. Now, this doesn't mean becoming cold or manipulative. It means becoming conscious, discerning, strategic. It means understanding that just as others are using you, you can also leverage their desire. Because once you accept that every person around you is driven by something: fear, ambition, loneliness, ego, you stop taking their behavior personally. And you start playing the game like a professional. You stop being surprised when someone ghosts you after they get what they want. You stop feeling betrayed when a friend stops calling once the party's over. You stop handing out parts of yourself like free samples in a mall. Instead, you observe, you measure, and you decide, is this person here for who I am or for what I give? And if they want access, what is the price of entry? This is not bitterness. This is power. The kind of power Machiavelli hinted at, not the power to dominate others, but the power to protect yourself from being dominated. In a world built on silent transactions, you can either be the currency or the one who sets the rate. Choose wisely, and that is where we begin. Imagine walking through a marketplace not of goods or produce, but of people. Every interaction is a booth. Every handshake, every favor, every compliment, it's all a transaction. You might not see the price tags at first, but they're there. They're hidden in the way someone says, "Can I pick your brain for a second?" In the text that starts with, "I was just thinking about you." In the favor that sounds like a friendship but feels like a bill. Welcome to the emotional marketplace. It's where loyalty is traded like currency, affection is rented. Even pity becomes leverage. Now, the problem isn't that people trade. Trading is natural, we all do it. The problem is that some of us walk through that market giving everything away. For free. You offer your time, your energy, your listening ear, your ideas, your warmth because you think it's kindness. And maybe it is. But here's the catch. When kindness is given without boundaries, the world doesn't see it as generosity. It sees it as a resource to exploit, and it will keep taking. Not because the world is evil, but because the world is hungry. And you forgot to charge. This is where Machiavelli's wisdom cuts through modern illusions like a blade. He didn't say, "Don't be generous." He said, "Mercy without calculation is not a virtue. It is a signal that you can be plundered for free." Think about that. In a society where being nice is praised, we're taught to feel guilty for drawing boundaries. But boundaries are not barriers. They're price tags. They signal worth. When someone asks for your time and you hesitate, they begin to value it more. When someone seeks your presence and you're not immediately available, they see it as rare, not cold. Scarcity creates desire. It's the reason high-end brands limit supply. It's the reason a musician's silence between albums builds anticipation. It's why your absence can say more than your words ever will. Now flip the lens. What happens when you're always available, always agreeable, always giving? You become cheap, not by essence but by perception. And perception, especially in the emotional economy, is everything. So here's the mindset shift. Start treating your attention like capital. Start treating your presence like investment. Not to manipulate, but to maintain your value. When you walk through the emotional marketplace aware of your worth, something changes. You stop chasing approval and start commanding respect. You stop overgiving and start observing who reciprocates. You stop wondering, why did they leave? And start thinking, did they ever deserve to stay? This is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. Because in this game of life, where emotions are currency and relationships are contracts, you have two options. Be the vendor who sets the price, or the product that gets consumed. And I promise you this, once you begin to price your worth, those who truly value you will pay. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how people reveal their needs without even realizing it? A colleague constantly asks for your input on projects. A friend always wants your opinion before making a decision. A partner clings to your attention like it's oxygen. At first glance, these might look like compliments. They might even feel flattering. But if you step back, you'll see them for what they really are, confessions of need. And in the world of power, need is currency, need is leverage. Machiavelli would tell you, don't ignore these signals. Study them, translate them, use them, because every approach carries a hidden equation. Every time someone wants something from you, time, presence, validation, knowledge, it's a declaration. You have something I don't, and I need it. That's the moment most people miss. They give away the answer without charging for the solution. But the strategist sees the formula and rewrites it. Let me give you a few examples. That colleague hungry for your ideas? He's not just seeking your brainpower. He's announcing that you're intellectually superior. So don't just feed him thoughts, invest him in influence. Tie your contribution to credit, to authority, to visibility. That romantic partner who can't stand your absence? She's not just craving love. She's signaling that your presence holds emotional gravity. So set a price not in money, but in commitment, in effort, in loyalty, that relative who's constantly demanding your time. He's showing that your time is worth more than his own. Don't ignore it. Wrap your respect in boundaries. Let him earn your availability, not assume it. This is what I call the algebra of need, and once you learn to calculate it, everything changes. You stop reacting and you start designing. You stop hoping to be appreciated and start structuring respect. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Isn't this manipulative? No, manipulation is when you deceive. This is strategy, it's about alignment. You're not forcing people to need you, they already do. You're simply refusing to ignore the value of what you bring. Let's be real, you wouldn't walk into a store, grab what you wanted, and leave without paying. But people do that to each other every day emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And the people who suffer the most are the ones who pretend not to notice, the ones who keep giving without asking, the ones who believe that love, friendship, or family should come with no strings attached. But even unconditional love, if left unchecked, becomes unaccountable love. And that's where resentment grows, that's where value disappears. So here's the shift. When someone shows desire, don't see it as a compliment. See it as a negotiation, and negotiate well, not out of greed, but out of respect for your worth. Because the truth is, your skills, your energy, your presence, these are not accidental gifts. They are assets. And it's time you started treating them like the precious leverage they are. Let me tell you something that might sting a little. The more available you are, the cheaper you become. It doesn't matter how brilliant you are, how loving, how generous. If you're always there, always answering, always saying yes, people stop seeing you as rare, and what's not rare is not respected. Now think about luxury brands. Why do people wait in line for hours just to buy a limited edition pair of sneakers? Why do collectors bid millions on a watch that only a few hundred people on the planet will ever wear? It's not just about quality, it's about scarcity. The feeling that something is rare, that you might not get another chance. Scarcity creates urgency, it creates value, it creates respect. But here's the twist. This doesn't just apply to products. It applies to you, your time, your energy, your attention, your presence, if people can reach you anytime. They'll stop appreciating your time if you always say yes. They'll stop seeing the cost of your effort if you never leave. They'll stop fearing your absence. And when someone doesn't fear losing you, they stop trying to keep you. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He knew that power isn't just about presence, it's about timing, about knowing when to vanish and when to reappear. Because done right, your absence can speak louder than your words. Imagine this. You step away from a social group for a while. No drama, no announcement, just silence. Weeks pass. And then you return not the same, but sharper, stronger, more focused. Suddenly, the room pays more attention when you speak. Your presence has become a limited edition. People lean in. Because now they're not just seeing you, they're experiencing you. And that's the secret. Scarcity isn't about manipulation, it's about positioning. It's not about playing hard to get, it's about being hard to replace. So, how do you apply this in your life? Delay your response to texts not out of rudeness, but to train people to value your reply. Say no more often, not as punishment, but as clarity. Leave some things unsaid so people feel the gravity when you do speak. Take intentional breaks from being seen so that your return feels like an event, not a routine. Because the truth is, the more accessible you are, the more people treat you like background noise. But when you control access to yourself, you become the headline. And here's the beautiful part: when you embrace strategic absence, you don't just raise your perceived value. You gain space, mental space, emotional space, creative space to grow. You stop being drained by the constant giving. And you start becoming the source of inspiration, of strength, of power. Remember this: silence is not emptiness. It's a statement. A well-placed absence can echo louder than 1,000 appearances, so don't fear being missed. Design it. Let me ask you something most people never stop to consider. Who's telling your story? Because if you're not crafting your own narrative, someone else is. And chances are they're not getting it right. In today's world, perception is everything. It's not just about who you are, it's about who the world believes you are, and those two things, they rarely match by accident. People don't see your full complexity. They don't know the late nights, the sacrifices, the resilience. They see headlines. They hear whispers. They make assumptions. Unless you shape it, unless you speak it, unless you sculpt it. Machiavelli understood this long before social media ever existed. He knew that the appearance of power often matters more than power itself. That spectacle, not substance, moves the crowd. He advised leaders to control their image ruthlessly, highlight their wins, cloak their weaknesses, direct attention like a conductor leads an orchestra. And in our modern world, that advice is more relevant than ever. Because today, you're not just a person, you're a profile, a brand, a collection of digital impressions. So here's the truth. If you don't shape your story with intention, the algorithm will do it for you, and it doesn't care about nuance. What should you do? You begin by asking, what do I want to be known for? Not just professionally, but personally. What values do you embody? What moments define you? What strengths do you consistently deliver? Then you broadcast with intention, not in an arrogant way, not in a shallow, look at me kind of way, but with quiet certainty. Share your wins, but only the ones that align with your values. Speak about your challenges, but do it from a place of reflection, not victimhood. Build a reputation around what you do repeatedly, not what you claim to be. And here's the key: let your results speak louder than your explanations. Because explanations are for the powerless. Results are the language of those in control. So next time someone questions your path, don't defend, demonstrate. When people doubt your worth, don't argue. Execute. The prince. Machiavelli once wrote, thrives on spectacle. And in our era, your digital trail is the new public square. So curate it like an artist. Filter out the noise. Turn every post, every appearance, every message into a brick in the structure of your legacy. Because your identity isn't just who you are, it's how you're remembered. And if you want to wield lasting power, you don't just live it, you narrate it. Let's talk about something no one ever teaches you, but everyone eventually learns: every favor is a form of credit. Every piece of advice you gave, every door you opened, every time you showed up when no one else did, those weren't just acts of kindness, they were investments. But here's the problem: most people never collect. They give and then wonder why no one shows up when they need help. They burn out, they feel bitter, and they start believing the world is unfair. But the truth is, it's not unfair. It's just operating by rules you never learned. And one of those rules is simple: powerful people keep ledgers, quietly, patiently, relentlessly. You see, Machiavelli understood the economy of favors better than most kings ever did. He knew that generosity isn't about getting something now. It's about building invisible strings you can pull later. Not manipulatively, not cruelly, but strategically. Because timing is everything. Let me ask you, when should you collect a favor? Not when you're desperate, not when you're angry, but when the return will multiply. When a single endorsement could bring you 5 more. When an introduction could unlock a whole new market. When revealing a well-timed truth about a rival could clear 10 competitors off the board. That's not exploitation. That's precision. And here's where most people get it wrong. They think being powerful means demanding repayment. But true strategy knows how to wait, How to let interest compound. Think of your goodwill like seeds. You don't yank them out of the soil the next day. You let them root, you let them bloom, and when the fruit is ripe you harvest, and sometimes the most effective harvest isn't a reward. It's a reminder. Let the colleague who once stole credit see your success up close. Let the ex-partner who took your loyalty for granted hear your name through others spoken with respect, with awe. Let your silence be the invoice they never expected and can never repay, but also choose your timing like a chess master. Because if you strike too soon, the value hasn't peaked. Strike too late and the opportunity is gone. This is what separates the amateur from the strategist. The amateur burns goodwill for validation. The strategist harvests it when the field is golden. So take a moment today and ask yourself whose name is in your invisible ledger, what debts are waiting in silence, and what precise, perfect moment could turn them into power? Because in the court of influence, power isn't always loud. Sometimes it moves in whispers, in quiet reminders, in well-timed pivots. And when you master this, you don't just play the game. You own the board. Let me say something that might surprise you. Fear is often more persuasive than kindness. Now, I don't mean fear in the cartoon villain sense. No threats, no shouting, no drama. I'm talking about something quieter, smarter, more ... strategic. The kind of fear that whispers instead of screams, that lingers in the air without ever needing to be spoken. Because here's the truth. Sometimes what people think you might do is more powerful than what you actually do. That uncertainty, that possibility can change behavior faster than any promise ever could. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He didn't say to rule with cruelty. He said if you must use it like lightning, swift, precise, then disappear, and let the silence do the rest. Think of someone who once tried to undermine you at work. You didn't call them out publicly. You didn't beg for justice. You just made it clear quietly that you knew. You let their imagination torture them more than any confrontation ever could. That's fear used correctly. Or imagine a partner who's drifting, testing limits. Instead of pleading, you become distant, reserved. And in that gap, they start to wonder what you're capable of walking away from. That's power. Not control, not revenge. Just awareness. Fear, when used ethically and sparingly, is not manipulation, it's calibration. Because people don't respond to logic nearly as much as they respond to pressure. Not always externally, but internally, the fear of losing your respect. The fear of you going silent. The fear of being exposed, replaced, or left behind. Used wisely, these subtle forms of fear do more to shape behavior than any well-meaning speech. But here's the key: use it like arsenic, not salt. Too much and you breed resentment. Too often and people grow numb, but just a hint of consequence. And suddenly you're no longer just another person in the room. You're someone they think twice before crossing. And don't mistake this for being cruel. Cruelty is blunt. Fear is sharp. Precise. You're not harming anyone. You're simply reminding them there are consequences for treating you carelessly. Not revenge reputation. Because when people know that you observe, that you remember, that you don't explode, but you record, they start adjusting their tone, their timing, their loyalty. And if you're still uncomfortable with that idea, ask yourself, do you want to be respected? Or just liked? Because often trying to be liked gets you neither. But earning respect, even wrapped in silence, creates a shield you'll never regret. So the next time someone tests your boundaries, don't bark, don't beg, don't explain, just pause. Let them wonder. Let their imagination fill in the blank. Let the weight of what you could do sit quietly between you. Because sometimes the threat you never make is the one they remember forever. Here's a paradox worth mastering. To be respected, you must be kind and sharp, warm, but not soft, approachable, but not available to all. Most people think they have to choose: either be the generous, open-hearted friend or the distant, calculating strategist. But the truth is, real power lives in the balance. It's what I call the velvet glove over the brass knuckles. People feel the comfort, but they also sense the steel underneath, and that's exactly what keeps them in check. Let's break this down. Warmth disarms people. It invites connection. It lowers defenses. It makes you approachable, trusted, admired. But warmth without limits? That becomes weakness. It leads to emotional overexposure, to burnout, to people assuming you're always available, always forgiving, always easy to reach, and even easier to use. Now on the other side, precision. Precision is cool, clean, measured. It's your ability to draw boundaries without shouting, to say no without guilt, to enforce standards without apology. But precision without warmth? That becomes coldness, intimidation, isolation. People start walking on eggshells. They avoid telling you the truth. They fear you, but they never connect with you. So how do you blend the two? You become unpredictable in the best way. You compliment generously, but only when it's earned. You help freely, but only once you've assessed the cost. You show kindness not as a default setting, but as a deliberate act. And when someone crosses the line, you don't explode, you don't lash out, you shift. Your tone tightens, your time becomes scarce. Your presence feels different. That's what leaves an impression. You don't need to intimidate anyone. People will adjust themselves around you. When they realize you move between warmth and consequence with control, this blend creates mystery. It makes people unsure of how far they can push. It makes them respect you not because you're loud, but because you're measured. And here's the kicker, this unpredictability, it protects you. It makes sure people don't take your kindness for granted. It ensures that when you're generous it lands, because they know you didn't have to be. Machiavelli advised princes to be feared more than loved, but if possible, to be both. And that still applies because fear keeps the world from stepping on you. But warmth, that's what makes the world follow you. So when someone meets you, let them feel the velvet. Let them trust the smile, but let them never forget there's metal beneath it. And that balance, calm, compassionate, but untouchably precise, that's not just charm, that's command. Sometimes the most powerful move is the one no one notices. You see, most people think power comes from bold declarations, from slamming fists, calling people out, or launching public attacks, but Machiavelli knew better. The strongest strategy is subtle, almost invisible, because when people don't see you coming, they can't stop you. Think about it. When you declare war on someone personally, professionally, socially, what happens? They rally, they gather allies. They posture, defend, and fight back. You've just given them a story one where they're the hero and you're the villain. Now the crowd watches, now you're trapped in the spotlight. And even if you win, you bleed. But when you move in silence, you let them defeat themselves. Let's say someone's trying to undermine your reputation. You don't need to scream about it. Instead, you quietly strengthen your alliances, you redirect key people. You plant seeds of doubt, subtle truths, minor facts, nothing loud, just quiet exposure. They begin to look unstable on their own. They make mistakes on their own. And when they finally collapse, no one traces it back to you. You didn't fight them. You just removed the supports they were leaning on. That's not cruelty, that's strategy. And here's where it becomes even more elegant. The crowd will thank you for solving a problem they never realized you caused, because real influence doesn't announce itself, it whispers. It guides attention instead of demanding it. It reshapes outcomes without signatures. This is why silence, when used wisely, is not weakness, it's camouflage. It lets you operate without resistance. And it allows your fingerprints to vanish while your results remain. If you look at history, the most dangerous players were never the ones shouting. They were the ones smiling, watching, letting others burn themselves out in the chaos they orchestrated. And you can apply this even in the smallest interactions. Someone starts gossiping about you? Don't defend yourself, just let their credibility decline as they overplay their hand. Someone competes with you unfairly? Don't attack, just isolate them from the network, remove their resources, drain their options. Let them drown in silence. Because power isn't about confrontation. It's about elimination without exposure. And when the dust settles, people remember outcomes, not accusations. They remember the fall, not the invisible hand that tilted the ground. So if you're tired of wasting energy in loud battles, stop swinging. Start studying, start planning. Start subtracting quietly, surgically. Because when you win without being seen, you don't just gain control, you become untouchable. Let me tell you something most people never consider. The truth matters, but myth lasts longer. In a world drowning in information, the facts are forgettable. But the story, that sticks. Your story, your rise, your resilience, it doesn't need to be perfectly factual. It needs to be emotionally undeniable. Machiavelli understood that power wasn't just about action. It was about perception. He knew that legends outlive logic. That whispers, if told the right way, echo for centuries longer than footnotes ever will. Look around. Steve Jobs didn't just build computers. He became the myth of a college dropout with a dream in a garage. A man who turned vision into a trillion-dollar empire. Was he alone? No. Did others help? Absolutely. But the myth? It moved the world. And here's the point. You can shape your own myth. You don't need to lie. You just need to curate. What moment defines your origin? What obstacle did you overcome that changed you? What personal struggle forged your worldview? Choose the beats of your story like a composer, omit the noise. Highlight the notes that resonate. Make it short enough to repeat, sharp enough to cut through doubt, and meaningful enough to inspire loyalty. Because people don't follow resumes, they follow arcs, they follow the rise, the fall, the rebirth. They follow someone who's been through fire and came back wiser, not wounded. Here's a simple truth. If your life reads like a checklist, you'll be remembered like a spreadsheet. But if your life sounds like a parable, like a struggle turned strength, people will carry your name forward because it feels like a mirror of their own battles. So how do you start building your myth? Pick your origin moment. Not where you were born, but where you awakened. Emphasize transformation. Show the before and after. Include a mentor, a sacrifice, a revelation. The elements that make myths universal make it retellable. If it can't be repeated in 2 sentences, it's too complex to spread. And here's the best part. Once your story becomes a myth, people share it for you. They tell others. They fill in the blanks. They elevate you beyond your own reach. Because at the end of the day, the crowd doesn't care if every line is factual. They care if it feels true. If it speaks to something they wish were true for themselves. And if you build that correctly, you won't just influence people in your presence. You'll control rooms you never enter. So the question isn't, what's your story? The question is, what story about you will survive when you're gone? That's your myth. Build it with care. Because long after the truth is forgotten, the legend remains. Let's say one day you vanish, no warning, no farewell post, no dramatic exit. Here's the real test of power. Would the systems you built keep running? Would people still say your name in rooms you never step into? Would your influence still shape decisions, shape culture, shape the future without you present? That is legacy, not a statue, not a plaque, not even a biography, but a system, a framework. A set of rituals, beliefs, and mechanics that continue moving because you once set them in motion. Machiavelli didn't want leaders who were simply feared. He wanted rulers who outlived their own mortality through policy, through practice, through institutions. Look at the great ones. Carnegie didn't just make steel, he built libraries, foundations, and educational systems that still shape minds today. The Vatican didn't rely on charisma alone, it created doctrine, rituals, and hierarchy that persisted long after any single pope. Even modern tech giants embed their founders' visions into code, policy, and platform architecture. That's succession done right. Because true power isn't when people obey you while you're alive, it's when they still depend on your architecture, long after you're gone. So here's the question, what are you building that doesn't require your presence? Most people spend their lives chasing visibility, but the real players? They build infrastructure, a business that runs without them, a movement that carries forward their values, a team trained in their philosophy, systems of onboarding, training, decision-making that mirror their vision even after they leave the room, and it goes deeper. If you want your legacy to last, don't just build structures, build belief. Brand your frameworks, name your principles. Stamp your initials into the process. Create phrases that are repeated like gospel. Because the more your values become culture, the more irreplaceable you become even in your absence. But here's the trap. Never give away the entire blueprint. Train successors just enough to operate the machine, but never enough to rewire it without you. That's how dynasties stay dynasties. And here's a final layer, one most people never consider. Cultivate rivals. Yes, rivals. Why? Because a world without challengers makes you soft. It dulls your blade, and worst of all, it breeds complacency. Think of Louis XIV of France. He gathered all his potential enemies into one palace, surrounded them with luxury, and made them compete for scraps of attention. They stayed too busy fighting one another to overthrow the throne. Brilliant. You don't eliminate threat, you manage it. You channel it. You use it to sharpen your edge and keep your kingdom lean. Because here's the truth, legacy without structure is luck. Legacy without challenge is decay. If you want your influence to echo for decades, don't just inspire people. Instruct them. Don't just lead, systemize. So if you vanish today, would the machine keep running? If not, you don't have a legacy. You have a hobby. Start building what outlives you, or risk being forgotten the second you fall silent. Here's a bitter truth no one likes to admit. Most people overstay their welcome. They build something great, then cling to it, clutch it like a crown that's rusting in their hands. They don't know when to step back, so the world writes their ending for them. But legends? They orchestrate their exits. They leave at the peak, not the plateau. They vanish on their own terms with a whisper, not a whimper. Even Machiavelli hinted at it. A wise ruler must know when to yield power not to weakness, but to the future. Think of it like this. The final act of power is letting go with precision. Not disappearing in silence, not collapsing from burnout, but exiting like a general leaving the battlefield armor intact, boots clean, and a trail of victories behind him. You don't just walk away. You stage it. You anoint a successor with symbolic weight, someone trained just enough to lead, but never enough to rewrite your design. You hold annual summits. You write frameworks that feel like scripture. You encode your name into rituals so deeply that every time the system runs, it whispers you. That's how power transitions into immortality. But here's the subtle art. When you leave the stage, don't disappear completely. Become a presence behind the curtain, an advisor, a myth, a ghost that still guides without interfering. Because if you cling to relevance, you'll strangle your own legacy. And if you vanish without a trace, you'll be forgotten. Balance is everything. Retire to something, not just from something, to peace, to reinvention, to reflection. Let the next version of you be a strategist from the shadows, not a tired king in a crumbling court. And when the world asks, where did they go? Let your systems answer. Let your students shine. Let your silence become proof that you built something real. Most people fear becoming irrelevant. But you've already built relevance into the walls. And here's the deeper truth, even exit is strategy. Even your final act writes your myth. So don't fade, conclude like a final note in a symphony, deliberate, powerful, echoing. When you do that, you don't just retire. You ascend. So after everything, after the battles, the strategy, the silence, the systems, the myth, it all leads to a single, unavoidable question. Did you shape the world, or did it shape you? That's the final Machiavellian test. Not how much money you made, not how many followers you gained, but whether the world around you bent to your design, or if you were just another soul swept along by the tide. Most people never ask this. They're too busy reacting, too distracted, too overstimulated, too overwhelmed. They live their lives like leaves in the wind blown, tossed, scattered, chasing meaning, begging for validation, surrendering authorship of their own story. But the few, the rare few, they pick up the pen. They write the terms. They carve meaning out of chaos and build something that didn't exist before they arrived. And maybe that's the true purpose of power, not domination, not fame, but the right, the permission to live life on your own terms, to sculpt your fate rather than survive inside someone else's, to lead your days with design, not accident, to rise not because the world allowed you to, but because you demanded it. And here's the secret Machiavelli understood better than anyone. Power, in the end, is not a crown, it's not a title, it's not applause or fear or control. Power is this, the ability to walk through a chaotic world and say, I will not be shaped. I will be the shaper. And when you're gone, what remains? Not your breath, not your heartbeat, but your fingerprints. Pressed into systems, stories, lives, decisions, dreams. That's immortality, not in flesh, but in impact. So if you remember nothing else from this journey, remember this. Don't just survive the world. Don't just succeed in it. Alter it. And when the dust settles, when your name is spoken in rooms you'll never enter, when people make decisions based on the echoes of your thoughts, then and only then can you answer that final question with a smile. I shaped it. And it remembers.